Welcome to Life Stories, where real life betrayals, resilience, and triumphs unfold. Imagine sitting at a family dinner, expecting warmth and laughter, only to have your world shattered in an instant. A mother-in-law's cruel scheme, a husband's silent betrayal, and a web of lies stretching back years. This is Olivia's story. But instead of crumbling, she fights back, uncovering secrets that will change everything. Stay with us as we dive into a tale of deception, strength, and ultimate freedom. Subscribe to our channel to begin today's story with Life Stories. The iced tea dripped from my silk blouse in slow, deliberate streaks, seeping into the fabric like ink bleeding onto parchment. The amber liquid spread across my lap, its chill shocking against my skin. For a moment, I just sat there, watching the stain grow, unable to process what had just happened. The dining room was utterly silent, save for the soft clink of ice cubes tumbling onto the hardwood floor. My name is Olivia Harrison, and this was the moment my mother-in-law decided to destroy my marriage. Oh dear, Margaret said, her voice drenched in false concern. My hand must have slipped. She set the empty pitcher on the table with deliberate care, her manicured fingers lingering on the crystal handle. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, flickered with something far too smug for an accident. I felt every gaze in the room settle on me, Ryan's bewildered stare, Ashley's barely concealed smirk, even little Lily's wide-eyed shock from her booster seat. The Sunday roast sat untouched in the center of the table, steam still curling from the perfectly plated portions. Just an hour ago, I had been dicing vegetables beside Margaret in the kitchen, making small talk while she carefully arranged everything as if we were about to host a state dinner. I should have seen it then, the way her smile never reached her eyes. The way she scrutinized me as though I were an interloper in her home rather than her son's wife of 8 years. Ryan pushed back his chair. "Let me help you clean up," he said, starting to rise. Margaret's hand shot out, gripping his wrist before he could move. "Actually," she said smoothly, "before anyone gets up, there's something we need to discuss." She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. My stomach twisted before she even slid it across the table. I didn't need to open it to know what it contained. The familiar legal letterhead was visible through the paper. "Divorce papers," Margaret announced as if introducing the next course. "Already filled out. All Ryan has to do is sign." The world tilted slightly, but I kept my expression calm. My hands, now cold and sticky with tea, curled into fists under the table. I turned to my husband, searching his face for any flicker of surprise, any hint that this was as much of an ambush for him as it was for me. But Ryan wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he focused on his untouched mashed potatoes, suddenly fascinated by the swirling patterns in the gravy. "You knew about this," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Before he could answer, Margaret spoke for him. "Let's not make this more dramatic than it needs to be, dear." She folded her hands neatly on the table, the picture of serene authority. "We all know this marriage isn't working. Ryan needs someone who understands family values. Someone who can support his dreams instead of..." She gestured vaguely at my tea-soaked appearance, "whatever this is." Ashley snorted into her wineglass. "At least you didn't ruin one of your good outfits, Liv. That one looks like it came straight off a clearance rack." Lily, only 8 years old, shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her small fingers gripping the edge of the table. Even she could sense the cruelty in the room, the deliberate way they were dismantling my life piece by piece. I stood up slowly, feeling the cold liquid trickle down my spine. The room seemed smaller, suffocating. Ryan still hadn't looked at me. "Ryan," I said quietly, "look at me." He finally lifted his head, and what I saw in his eyes told me everything. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't even just his mother's doing. This was premeditated, calculated, and I had been too blind to see it coming. 8 years, I murmured, barely above a whisper. 8 years of marriage, and you let your mother dump iced tea on me before serving me divorce papers? "It's not like that," he started, but I was already moving. I picked up my own glass of wine, a full-bodied red that Margaret had been saving for a special occasion, and walked around the table with measured steps. Margaret's smug expression faltered slightly as I approached. "You're right about one thing. I said, standing over her. This marriage isn't working. Then, with the same calculated grace she had used moments ago, I tipped the glass. The red wine cascaded over her perfectly coiffed hair, staining the pristine white blouse she had so carefully chosen for the evening. There was a beat of stunned silence. Then Lily giggled, quickly stifled by Ashley's sharp glare. Margaret gasped, sputtering in outrage, and Ryan lurched forward, his hands raised as if to stop the inevitable. Olivia. But I was already moving again. I strode toward the door, pausing only to grab my car keys from the entry table. Behind me, I could hear Margaret's shrill voice, Ryan's weak attempts to calm her, Ashley's amused snicker. Olivia, wait, Ryan called after me. I didn't wait. I didn't look back. As I stepped out into the crisp Chicago evening, the cold air stung my skin. But I barely felt it. My hands shook, not from the chill, but from something deeper, something raw and electric coursing through my veins. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The hotel room was sterile, impersonal, and smelled faintly of lemon-scented cleaner. I hadn't chosen it for comfort, only for distance. Distance from that house, from Margaret's triumphant smirk, from Ryan's cowardice. I stared at my phone, its screen illuminating the dim room with a single message. Please come home. We can talk about this. I let out a bitter laugh. Talk? When? Exactly. Had talking ever been part of our marriage? I tossed the phone onto the bed and resumed pacing. My blouse, still damp with tea, clung to my skin. I could still feel the sticky residue, as if Margaret's pettiness had physically marked me. But that wasn't what made my stomach churn. It was the documents I had found after I left. Our bank accounts. Scrolling through the transaction history had started as a desperate attempt to reclaim some sense of control. Instead, it had unearthed something far worse than an overbearing mother-in-law. There were payments I didn't recognize. Thousands of dollars, siphoned off regularly over the years, all to an account I had never seen before. Each transfer neatly labeled, business investment, but I knew better. Margaret's bank. The realization had settled over me like a cold fog. Ryan had been feeding his mother money for years, under my nose, using our joint finances, my credit, my trust. I was still staring at the figures, my pulse hammering in my ears, when a knock at the door jolted me back to the present. I hesitated, half expecting it to be Ryan. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw Ashley standing there, arms crossed, looking impatient. I considered ignoring her, but curiosity won out. The door clicked open, and before I could say anything, she pushed past me, bringing with her the scent of expensive perfume and what I could only describe as desperation. You're making a huge mistake, she said, dropping onto the single chair in the room. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, which part? The leaving, or the part where your mother humiliated me in front of my own husband? Ashley waved a dismissive hand. Mom was dramatic. Sure, but come on, Liv. You had to see this coming. I folded my arms. Why don't you enlighten me? She sighed, as if I were a child who needed things explained slowly. Ryan needs someone who supports him. Supports him? I repeated, incredulous. You mean financially? Ashley flinched, just slightly, and that was all the confirmation I needed. How many of his sure thing investments have you backed? Ash? I pressed. She shifted uncomfortably. That's different. I believe in his vision. I let out a humorless laugh. His vision? You mean like the cryptocurrency mining operation that nearly burned down our garage? Or the artisanal pickle business that lasted exactly 2 weeks? Ashley's jaw tightened. You never supported him properly. If you had. If I had what? I cut in. Kept working 60-hour weeks so he could throw away more of our savings? Let Margaret keep pulling the strings while I played the obedient wife? Ashley stood abruptly, smoothing down her designer dress. Mom was right about you, she said, voice dripping with disdain. You never deserved Ryan. I smirked. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing about him. She turned to leave, but I wasn't done. Oh, and Ashley? I called out. She hesitated. That Cartier bracelet you're wearing, the one Ryan gave you for your birthday? I tilted my head. I paid for that too. Her face flushed. Her hand flew instinctively to her wrist. fingers brushing over the gold band as if it might suddenly vanish. He says a lot of things. I interrupted. Now get out. Ashley stormed out without another word, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, breathing hard, the conversation replaying in my head. They had underestimated me. Margaret, Ryan, Ashley, all of them. They thought I would slink away quietly, sign the divorce papers, and disappear, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. I sat down at the small desk and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked accusingly at me as I logged into our accounts again. That's when I noticed something new. A series of transfers. Regular, consistent, and starting exactly 2 months after our wedding. All marked, business investment. All feeding into Margaret's account. I felt my stomach drop. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had been planning this from the very beginning. I didn't sleep that night. The numbers swam in my vision. A cold and relentless tide. Every transaction, every withdrawal, every careful siphon of money into Margaret's account. It was all there. Laid out in indisputable detail. 8 years of manipulation, disguised as trust, hidden behind a marriage I had believed was real. By the time the first streaks of dawn filtered through the cheap hotel curtains, my rage had settled into something sharper. Something more dangerous. Resolve. I was going to fight back. My phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with another message from Ryan. Liv, please. Let's talk. Don't do anything reckless. Reckless. As if I were the problem. Before I could respond, not that I planned to, another knock at the door made me tense. For a second, I thought Ashley had come back for round 2. But when I looked through the peephole, I froze. Lily. Her small frame was nearly swallowed by the oversized hoodie she wore. Her backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Her lower lip trembling. Aunt Liv? She whispered. I didn't know where else to go. I yanked open the door and pulled her inside, crouching to her level. Lily, sweetheart, what are you doing here? My mind raced. Did Margaret or Ashley know she was gone? Did Ryan? She sniffled, wiping her nose on her sleeve. Mom and Grandma were fighting. Uncle Ryan came over, and they were all yelling about money and papers and stuff. Then Mom started crying, and Grandma kept saying terrible things. She looked up at me, eyes wide. She said you stole from us. But that's not true, right? My throat tightened. No, baby, I said softly. That's not true at all. Lily nodded, as if she had already known the answer. Then, carefully, she pulled something out of her backpack, a thick manila folder. Creased from where she had been holding it tightly. I found this in Mom's room. She admitted. She was crying over it last night. I took the folder with trembling hands and flipped it open. My breath hitched. Bank statements, loan documents, emails, dozens of them. They weren't just using my name. They had been planning this for years. Covering their tracks with careful precision. I swallowed hard. Looking back at Lily, she was only 8 years old. She shouldn't have had to witness any of this, let alone understand it. But she wasn't stupid. She had seen the truth long before any of us had. You're not the bad guy, she said quietly. They are. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Margaret. I hope you're proud of yourself. Ryan is devastated. Lily is missing. If you had any decency, you'd sign those papers quietly and leave us in peace. Peace. They thought they had me cornered. Humiliated. Defeated. They expected me to disappear. Instead, I grabbed my car keys and Lily's hand. Where are we going? She asked. I looked down at her, my grip tightening protectively. To fix this. Margaret wanted peace? She was about to learn that peace came at a price. And this time, I wasn't the one who would be paying it. The courtroom emptied slowly, the echo of footsteps fading into the marble walls. I remained seated, watching as Margaret was led away in handcuffs. Her once impeccable posture now bent under the weight of her own downfall. 7 to 10 years. That was the sentence. Not forever, but long enough. Lily sat beside me, swinging her feet, her small hands tracing invisible patterns on the wooden bench. She's really gone? She asked, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I nodded. She won't hurt you anymore. Melanie approached hesitantly, clutching an envelope. The house sold above asking price. She said, handing it to me. Your share of the proceeds. I know it doesn't make up for. Keep it, I interrupted. Put it in Lily's college fund. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. A hint of something we hadn't shared before, understanding. Ryan lingered near the doors. Watching, but I didn't acknowledge him. He had made his choices. So had I. My phone buzzed. An email from my old company. My name had been cleared. The board wanted me back. With a promotion. And a public apology. I deleted the message. Some places you just can't go back to. Lily tugged my sleeve, holding up a crumpled piece of paper, a business plan. Drawn in crayon. Mom says I'm too young. But I've been saving my allowance. She said proudly. I want to start an art studio for kids. No pressure. No competition. Just creating. I smiled. Truly smiled. For the first time in years. Let's talk about it over ice cream. I said. She beamed. Can Mom come too? I glanced at Melanie. Maybe. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting free. Subscribe to our channel for more life stories.